Welcome to Uncopyable Women in Business. I'm Kay Miller, also known as Muffler Mama. I've been the #1 salesperson in a male-dominated industry, a successful entrepreneur for over 30 years, and now my mission is to help you build a business and brand nobody else can compete with. If you're ready to break out of the pack and create your own uncopyable advantage, stay tuned. My guests and I are here to help. I'm excited about my guest today, Shannon Plumb, CEO of Pearl Advisors and founder of the Authentic Leader Revolution. She has a very unique journey. She started as a professional ballerina and then moved to a Fortune 500 enterprise sales executive and now is the CEO of her own company, Pearl Advisors. Shannon helps growth stage leaders scale their businesses without losing their soul, using authenticity as a real competitive advantage. Shannon, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you. I'm so excited to be here today.
This is going to be a fun conversation, and I do want to talk a little bit about your journey. Of course, being a ballerina is very unique. I told you I happen to have a friend who was a ballerina, but then your career path took some interesting turns. So why don't you give us a little background on your journey?
Absolutely. So I started at a young age dancing and fell in love with it and really became all consumed by everything ballet. If you knew me when I was younger, everyone knew me as the ballet dancer. It was my identity, so closely tied to that. I broke my foot and ended up having to sit out and watch for a full year as that mended. And like so many things in life, when you get perspective and see the other side of the coin, you go, oh, I've missed out on all of this. So I decided that to end my ballet career, it was a really tough decision, being that my identity was so closely tied to it. But I had a real conundrum of, okay, this is who I am. This is what I do. This is how everyone knows me. Who am I now? What am I doing now? And so from that, did some exploration, as we all do in college, and switched my majors like 3 or 4 times in college. Still really didn't know what I wanted to do. Okay. I ended up graduating without a job. And just before I was set to walk graduation, I went to a career fair, and Unit Technologies, which was part of WorldCom at the time, so Fortune 2 company, was recruiting for AEs. And I thought, I majored in design. I have a background in dance. Why can't I sell? Everyone can sell, right? So I walked up to the specialist and convinced them that because I could tell people what their environment should be like and what space they should live in or work in, that I was good at selling my ideas, and therefore that would easily translate into sales. Of course, I didn't know anything at the time, but for some reason they took a chance on me, and that's how I got into my early sales career. And that was such a fortuitous event because they, being such a large organization, had so many resources dedicated to helping people learn the art and the science of sales. And they put me through a year study program, essentially, where I traveled from city to city for 1 week a month for an entire year and deep dove into a concept in sales. So 1 week could be negotiations. The next week could be, what's your elevator pitch and how do you succinctly describe what you do with value? And for that entire year, I got my sales education. That was really the basis for the rest of my career in sales thus far. It was a very interesting experience.
It sounds fascinating. I like your comment that you say everything is sales, because I work with a lot of small business owners and they don't want to sell. They don't want to market, and they especially don't want to sell. And when I ask, who sells for your company then? Well, nobody. So the owner does sell, and it can be a really great experience. And you sold yourself to this company. You said you persuaded them. So what do you think it was about you that won them over? Was it your passion? Was it your commitment, your unique background? What would you say helped persuade them?
Thinking back, I think there's probably a few things. I don't know how much hiring you've done for sales, but I'm assuming probably quite a bit in your career. And as a sales leader, what I always looked for were athletes, people who I knew were dedicated and understood what discipline was, how to do things over and over day after day and get better at them, who were okay with monotony, who had that perseverance. And I think ballet definitely played into all of those buckets. So I think they saw that. I also have been told throughout my life that I am very passionate. It's definitely one of the values that I think people get in talking with me. That can be good and that can be bad. To some people, it's too much. To others, it's not enough. But I do think that that came through and that they saw someone who was confident and believed and really curious, just like open to learning. I didn't walk in and say, I know everything. I walked in and said, hey, I think I could be good at this. Here's my background and here's why. I'm totally open to learning and to growing. And I think that was really attractive as well.
I have done some hiring. In fact, when I was in outside sales, my management, when I left the company, they said, will you help us hire your replacement? And it was so hard. I'm looking at their shoes, just like that old adage, what do their shoes look like? But I really believe, as you implied or said, who do you hire? Who do you hire? Somebody that's passionate. Do you have Trader Joe's where you are?
I love Trader Joe's. I must say I'm a little obsessed.
I'm obsessed too. What are the employees like? They are so fabulous. And I really believe that if you train someone who has the traits that you were just describing, that you had, then, I'm sorry, I think I said train, but if you hire someone like that, you can train them. But if you hire somebody that you just think, oh, well, we'll train them into having that attitude, very difficult. And something like Trader Joe's, other companies, it's just really obvious that people have that kind of passion and you need to find those people. So let's talk about, what happened from that point. You were you said you started out as an AE, an account executive, right? And
I
then
did.
You moved through that. So how did that happen? And what was it about you that helped you succeed?
Absolutely. So I have had 1,000 different careers in my career and tiny little pivots. And I think anyone who's really honest for the most part has. You look occasionally and find somebody who's worked at the same company for 30 years, but I imagine even within that same company, they've had different roles, different responsibilities, different structures that they report into. Same was true of my career. So I decided after a year with WorldCom that it wasn't really my cup of tea. I love small, nimble companies. I didn't know that at the time, but it felt just so huge and so much politics, and there was a right way to do everything and it was already defined. And I know from my life that I liked to do I take the path less chosen. I don't usually take the easy path. I follow my gut and my instinct and kind of go where the wind takes me in a lot of cases. And so my then boyfriend, now husband, and I packed up a U-Haul and drove out to Colorado without jobs and without knowing anybody because we had this dream that we wanted to live in Boulder, Colorado. So we decided to pursue that. That also meant that we moved out here without income, which neither of our families was incredibly happy with. And we weren't married at the time. So we were a little bit of the black sheep of the family at the time. We moved out here and I took whatever job I could find, quite honestly. So I had a year's experience. To date myself, 9/11 happened right after we moved here, which meant that everyone went into a hiring freeze and nobody knew what the new normal was going to be. I went to the mall and walked in and got a job at Eddie Bauer as a sales associate. I figured I could sell one thing, I could sell anything. I had never been in retail in my life, but I knew how to talk to people. So I wasn't scared to do that. Within a month, they asked me if I would interview to be a manager. And so I was quickly promoted to store manager and spent a couple of years in retail. And I think that really helped me from a consumer perspective. It helped me understand the buying process from the prospect rather than from the seller's perspective, because I, first of all, had a million at-bats because people are constantly walking into a store. You're constantly having the same conversation. You get to try things on quickly, meaning you get to test out messaging, see what's impactful, see what the reaction is. I think that really helped me both think on my feet as well as fine-tune things quickly. And just managing a young staff who turned over very rapidly, who would not show up for work, who were not necessarily intrinsically motivated in the same way that you are in a professional environment. was really an interesting experience for me in both leadership as well as in me just kind of establishing what does being a leader mean, and is this something that I want to pursue in my career. So I did that for several years. Again, the wind blew us. We went to St. Thomas. We sold everything we owned, moved to St. Thomas for a year. I worked on the cruise ship docks in a high-end jewelry store. My husband had a job there, and we spent the year snorkeling and experiencing island life. All those things that you can do before you have kids. So that was kind of my entry. We ended up coming back to Colorado, and I looked around and said, I don't ever want to leave here again. The islands had taught me that the grass is not greener or the ocean's not bluer. I'm a mountain girl, and I really love the mountains. And living on an island was a little too isolating for me. There weren't a lot of opportunities, and it was a difficult environment to live in. So when I came back here, I said, I'm going to figure out how to have a career where I can stay just here. And that's when I started exploring SaaS and technology.
You are quite the adventurer. And I think being open to all those adventures has worked in your favor for sure, and taking risks. I think the retail aspect is really important. I've had retail in my background too. Out of college, I couldn't find a job. So that's where I went. And your comment about understanding the buyer, and how many times do you go into a clothing department or something and say, are you looking for something? Can I help you? Instead of asking and finding out, the things that they might not even know about what will serve them the best. So sales and business and life is all about understanding that person. So what a great exercise, I think, for you listening. Even when you go to a retailer and you are being sold to, listen to how they're talking with you. It's a great education, usually, unfortunately, about what not to do. But then
yes.
There are people like you that do that.
That know my favorite pet peeve was, would you like your receipt with you or in the bag? What a waste of a last impression.
That's a good point. So what would be a better way to say that?
What could we have done to make your shopping experience better? Are you willing to recommend coming in to somebody else that you know? Just anything to get the conversation started, to get them to open up with you, or at least leave them with a great lasting impression. When you go to Chick-fil-A, they say, it was our pleasure to serve you. Just something that feels special to you, that makes you go, oh, I was appreciated. This experience, that they appreciate me stopping in and purchasing something. Transactional is, do you want your receipt, right?
Exactly. And there's a saying that I've noticed that is fairly new and that I hear a lot and that I just love. And that is, people say, I appreciate you. Instead of saying thank you or I appreciate it, it's I appreciate you. And I tell you, that's a warm fuzzy for me. So that's a really good point about what is the lasting impression? Just say, thanks for coming in or whatever, or receipt in the bag is the worst. But yeah, those little nuances really do make a difference. We're humans. We want to relate. And especially with, of course, AI, all those little keys are important. Hey there. This podcast is meant to give you an uncopyable advantage. If you're ready to jump on the fast track, go to beuncopyable.com/K. You'll get the scoop on my books, webinars, personal consulting, and our Moose Market. It's all designed to help you stand out, sell more, grow your business and brand in a way that's truly uncopyable. So as you changed, we'll say chapters, you moved from chapter to chapter, how did that impact your personal brand? And especially, what advice do you have for women who are making or want to make really bold career moves?
Really good questions. I must admit, early in my career, I didn't think about having a personal brand in the same way that I do today. It was not a subject of much conversation. Not only that, but it was often looked at as a detractor from the organizations that you worked with to draw personal attention when you are an employee. And I think that has really changed. I think this is a change that employers have gone about kicking and screaming. They haven't loved it, but a very necessary change as we've evolved, as there's become less security, as the market has changed drastically over the last 25 years. So I think that that's something to note. But I always did think about my personal brand in the sense of I want to lead with my values. I want to show up in a way that represents who I am at my core, that I would be proud to have somebody telling somebody else about. So that's how I always thought about my personal brand. Things I thought about, I never want to leave an employer on bad terms. I always want to end respectfully, giving my notice. I saw a lot of people make that mistake, especially in retail, where I didn't show up one day and the world is increasingly smaller and smaller. And those things usually do come around at some point in time. So that's one. Leading with integrity and honesty. And, if I can't do something, I'm going to say I can't do it. Or if I missed the deadline, I'm going to own it. So those are the things that I thought about in my personal brand, and just representing my core values in a positive light in a way that I would be happy to have other people talking about me. That has evolved, obviously, since then, especially now owning my own business. That's a very different, but it didn't start. The seed was planted back when I graduated, even when I was dancing professionally before, going through college, about how I show up in the world and how I treat others.
I'm very passionate about the concept of a personal brand. Our latest book I co-wrote with Steve is called Uncopyable You, and it's how to get people to know, like, and trust you. And then we add something that's so important, it's critical, and that's to remember you. When you're working for a company, and I've worked for companies, of course, you have to represent their brand. But you might be selling the same thing as everyone else, and your competition is selling something that's very similar to what you're selling. So your personal brand is really what sets you apart. I love the saying that your personal brand is what people say about you when you're not in the room. And you just alluded to that. What do people think when they think of Shannon Plumb? Because it's that human to human, again, leading with integrity, doing things that seem like they're common sense, like calling people back and being trustworthy and not saying, oh yeah, this order will be here in time when it really won't. Those are critical. And that is up to you as an individual to manage, to be intentional about your personal brand. And as you said, it can evolve. It can evolve. Now, the integrity, your values, those will not change. But the things that maybe set you apart, like you have this incredible background as a ballerina. First thing I asked you was, what was that like? How are your feet? Because my other son is a ballerina. Something like that. No one can copy that. No one can copy your story, how you did these adventures. So I think your personal brand point is great. I just have to throw in something about the athlete. I was not an athlete. I played the French horn. I was a band nerd. But our daughter was a golfer, and she golfed all the way through college. She had a scholarship. Wow. And she ended up working for Callaway, which is a golf company. But there was a whole organization that helped employers connect with athletes, because that absolutely tells you something about them, like the determination, the commitment, that, the hardships that you had to go through. I think that's great. And, if you weren't an athlete like me, I was always picked last for every team. Don't get K on your team. But, I had other things that I did very, very well, including the French horn. That also takes commitment. But I like your point about being an athlete. And I stuck with French horn all the way through college. I marched in the freaking marching band. And
that's amazing. I consider that a team sport, because you have to be in unison. You have to support each other. You have to listen to the other instruments playing and the cues and the conductor. Like, that is very much a team sport in my mind. So I wouldn't discount that. I would count that.
I love that. Thank you. And something I hadn't thought about in years is that when I marched through the mud in the field, one time I literally lost my shoe. So it's cold and it's raining and I'm marching with one shoe. So yes, think of your background, you listening. What do you have in your background that can represent the qualities that Shannon and I are talking about? Because that being uncopyable is not, your product and service. It never is. It's about you, your personal brand, what you represent to your customer. I want to ask you something we also mentioned beforehand. I have some opinions, and I know you do too. What separates leaders who actually do the sales for you versus those who lead with authenticity. Why don't you explain your philosophy on that?
Absolutely. So it's very different. A doer versus an enabler or a coach. You'll see oftentimes that organizations will hire their first sales hire will be called a player coach. And the expectation in that case is that they're doing and leading. And I think that's such a slippery slope because by doing, you are innately in competition with the rest of the team. And being a competitive person, as most salespeople and probably sales leaders, I would assume are, I know I am myself, having the fact that you are actually competing for opportunities and trying to be supporting a team, those are in conflict just by definition. And so I like to think of a doer as somebody who is out there, who is executing, and a leader is somebody who sets the vision, who can help remove obstacles, who can help you see around corners that you haven't thought about, who can layer on and help you get a voice in those meetings when somebody's not paying attention. They're really enabling you. Their whole job is to support you, to help you understand where you're going as part of that company. And if you're not on the same path the company is, to help you understand what your personal goals are and help you get there, whether it's in the company or elsewhere. And I think that's a really important aspect. The best leaders that I have ever worked with and how I think about leadership is that you really care about the person. And it doesn't matter if that person's a good fit here or somewhere else. And you'll talk with people that I've worked with over my career. We stay in touch. I'm helping them long after I worked with them at that company because I think a true leader cares about them as a person and wants to help them achieve their goals, wherever those may be.
I agree. And before we talked, I mentioned just a little thing that happened, an interaction. It was an HVAC company. They actually asked me to be in their little photo shoot. Very, very casual, low key. But I got some insight into how their sales process worked. And the salesperson was talking about a deal that she lost. And the sales manager said, "Oh, well, I ended up closing that deal." And she said, "Well, how did you close them?" And he said, "Oh, I gave him a 10% discount." How the heck do you think that salesperson felt? That's just the opposite of what you're describing. And so some of these things, I always think, common sense isn't always common. Some of these things might seem obvious, but it's really worth paying attention to the things that Shannon is bringing up. This is part of your team. Don't compete with your team. Sales leaders usually come from sales. You're right. We are competitive, but I feel like good leaders create other leaders, not followers. So really, it's so much about how your employees, not just your employees, but they're on the front line for your customers. So let's switch and talk about what you're doing now. You started Pearl Advisors. You've got this authentic leader revolution based on authenticity, which is critical. And of course, we've got AI that everybody is thinking about. And so authenticity is such an opportunity to stand out, be uncopyable. So talk about what you are doing with your current job, your company, I should say, your company and the movement that you're creating.
Absolutely. So it's interesting. When I left corporate, I myself was a little bit lost, and I knew that the title that I held, which coming out of tech was Chief Revenue Officer. And that was, again, my identity. That's how I was presented to the world. But when I stepped back and really took a moment to think about what had made me successful, what my unique skills were and what made me uncopyable, is exactly what you said, Kay, which is me, right? What I brought to the table, how I showed up, how I took care of customers and prospects, how I led teams. That's what made me uncopyable. It wasn't some playbook that anyone could steal and try to run. It was my own uniqueness. And I always like to think of sales, and I think really just life is an art and a science, right? There's certain foundations and ways to do things, but then there's like what you do that makes it special. There's that, color that you paint that nobody else would have thought of. And that's very much what I think is missing. You hit the nail on the head. AI is prevalent. We're all torn to try to figure out what's real and what's fake. Is this comment on LinkedIn somebody, or is it somebody just trying to get my attention through a bot, or a bot trying to get my attention?
Right.
And so I think now is the time, as you mentioned, to lean into authenticity. So really the authentic leadership movement is about helping people harness what makes them unique and being confident enough, feeling like they have a voice to not try to feel like they have to copy everybody, but to stand on their own, to speak their own truth, to really listen to their instincts. And I believe that up to this point, we've trained people to stop listening to that. We've trained them to follow status quo. We've trained them to follow a playbook. And because of the environments in a lot of companies and organizations have gotten more and more complex with layoffs, with politics, that toxicity has grown. It definitely has changed over the last 25 years. And that has caused people to lose faith and trust in themselves. They've lost that touch base with their gut to understand what feels right, what isn't right. A lot of people I see are doing things because they feels like something they should do. They're posting on LinkedIn because that's what everyone else is doing. They're saying something this way because that's how everyone else does it. And I believe that what is going to set humans apart from AI is the ability to think beyond that, to trust our instincts, to read the room, to truly connect human to human and use that to our advantage. And so what I'm doing is I'm working with leaders, executive leaders who are recovering from a toxic environment in some way or trying to navigate their way through that, help them reclaim themselves. And by that, I mean their instincts, their values aligning with where they want to be if it's different from where they are now. And you see this play out a lot in burnout, people changing jobs incredibly often, more and more people leaving corporate to start their own companies, people having to totally step back and quit sales because they don't feel as a woman that there's a place for them to balance having a family and running a team. Those are just some examples, but I think that it's a shift that we need to make sooner rather than later, and that people are absolutely being hurt personally, physically, and mentally because of the expectations for them to be something else.
Before we get into the Authentic Leader Revolution, I want to give you a chance to tell people where they can learn more and get involved with you. Do you have any specific things? I think, okay, so we take a deep dive. We learn about ourselves, what's important. Personally, I like the idea of having a branding promise and telling your customer what it is. Don't let them figure it out. So do you have some way of not only being authentic, but communicating that to your prospect or customer? It could be simple or complex, but for the people listening, what is something that they can do or say?
Absolutely. So I actually have a methodology that I work with clients on that might be really helpful here. And this is a way to cut through the confusion and decide what's right for you. So as I know that we all get to a point and we're like, I'm hearing this, but I'm feeling this. How do I decide what's right? Is this a red flag? Or is this a growth opportunity? It's just making me uncomfortable because it's something I haven't done before. And the acronym that I have assigned to that is PROVEN, PROVEN. In case you think it's helpful, I'm happy to walk through what those steps are because I do think it's a very practical way.
We have to do it quickly, but I'd love to hear what that is. Yes.
Yeah. So pattern is the first one, the P. Is it getting better or worse? So quick gut check. Is this on the path up or is this on the path down? The second is respect. Are my boundaries being respected? Is this something that is going outside of what I personally want? O is orientation. So this is it being honored or bulldozed? This is something that's respecting me or totally ignoring me. Vitality is V. So is making something that feels good for you, or is it making you feel really depressed? Obviously really important. E is empowerment. So are you choosing this, or is this something you've been trapped into and you feel like you don't have another way out? And then the last is N. So this is nourishment. Is this building you up or breaking you down? And I think if you can quickly go through those gut checks and those layers, that's a really nice way for you to uncover, is this something that aligns or doesn't align with how I want to move forward?
It really pays off.
Is that quick enough?
Yeah, that is really, it's great. And PROVEN is the acronym. Acronyms are always helpful.
Yeah.
And I think that, and I've been guilty of this, just kind of going through the motions and not really spending the time to think about this and the points that you brought up in that PROVEN acronym and methodology. So To close this out, how can people get a hold of you, work with you, find out about becoming part of the Authentic Leader Revolution? I love that term. Revolution is always really powerful. So what would you recommend as a next step?
Absolutely. You can find me on LinkedIn, incredibly active there, and I share so much tactical strategic advice, and I'm posting almost on a daily basis. So please follow me there. You can also check out Pearl Advisors, and that's PURL advisors.com. And that is my website with all my contact information. But I'd love to connect with you. And if you have anything that I can help you with, please don't hesitate to reach out.
Well, I will put those links in the show notes. Do you know what your LinkedIn handle or whatever is?
It's Shannon Plumb, all one word.
Wow. That's good. You must have gotten in
I got it early.
Have that.
I got it really early.
Good. So that's easy to find. And check her out on LinkedIn. I'm sure you're willing to connect. And
Absolutely.
Also go to Shannon's website to learn more. Shannon, this has been a fascinating conversation. You are unique and uncopyable, and that really comes through in how you represent yourself. So I just want to end by saying thank you so much for being on the show.
Thank you so much for having me, Kay. I really enjoyed our conversation.
Thanks for listening to this episode of Uncopyable Women in Business. If you enjoyed it, please follow, rate, and review the show. And be sure to visit beuncopyable.com/K. Always remember, be uncopyable.